The unlikely encounter. In a quaint little cafe nestled on the outskirts of a bustling city, life moved at a different pace. For Nora, this cafe was her sanctuary, a place where the world outside faded into a blur of noise and chaos. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the soft chatter of patrons engaged in their own conversations. It was an ordinary day, or so she thought. As she entered the cafe after school, the familiar jingle of the doorbell announced her arrival. She made her way to her favorite corner booth, where sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm rays onto the wooden table. Today, however, something felt different. There was an unusual tension in the air, as if the universe held its breath. Nora glanced around, her curious nature piqued. That's when she spotted him, a figure cloaked in an oversized brown coat, huddled over a cup that appeared to be coffee. His skin bore intricate patterns that glowed faintly under the dim lighting, and his eyes were strikingly luminous. Two blue orbs that sparkled like distant stars. Intrigued by this odd presence, Nora felt an irresistible pull toward him. As she approached, she noticed how the cafe seemed to quiet down around them, as if time had paused just for this moment. With a boldness that belied her age, she stood on her tiptoes to peer over the table. "Hello," she said cheerfully. "Why are you sitting all alone?" The figure looked up, surprise flickering across his features. His voice was calm yet resonant when he finally answered, "I like the quiet." Nora tilted her head, studying him with innocent fascination. "I'm Nora," she introduced herself eagerly. "What's your name?" After a brief hesitation, an eternity in which it seemed he was weighing the significance of such a simple question, he replied, "You may call me Kale." Her smile widened as she hopped into the seat opposite him. "Nice to meet you, Kale. Can I sit here? I don't like sitting alone either." Kale nodded slowly, his glowing eyes dimming slightly as if adjusting to her presence. And just like that, an unlikely friendship began. One marked by simple conversations that felt both monumental and trivial at once. As minutes turned into hours, Nora peppered him with questions about everything under the sun, his favorite colors, what he thought about Earth food, and even if he had any pets. Each query was met with thoughtful responses from Kale, who found himself drawn into this childlike wonderment. "Where are you from?" she asked innocently while dipping a biscuit into her hot chocolate. Kale paused for a moment. His gaze seemed to drift far away, as if peering through time itself. "From a place you cannot imagine," he finally said. "My world is different." "Is it as pretty as Earth?" Nora pressed on eagerly. Kale considered her question carefully. It was both simple and profound. "Now it is empty," he murmured softly. "Lonely." The word hung between them like a heavy cloud. Nora sensed something deeply sad in his tone. Without thinking twice, she reached across the table and gently tapped his hand with her small fingers brushing against his textured skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered sincerely. Kale looked down at her hand before meeting her gaze again, unsure how to respond to such kindness from one so young. Despite all his wisdom and experiences spanning galaxies far beyond what Nora could comprehend, this small act left him momentarily speechless. Little did Nora know that Kale was no ordinary visitor. He was not just a traveler or a refugee from some distant galaxy, but rather the last of his kind, the sole ruler of an empire that had once spanned light years across the cosmos. His people were conquerors and explorers. They were scientists who pushed boundaries unimaginable to humankind. But all that remained now was nothing but echoes lost to time and interstellar conflict. He was a galactic emperor displaced from his throne, a being drifting through space without purpose or subjects left to rule over. And yet here he sat in this quiet cafe on a small planet sharing moments of peace with an innocent child who saw beyond appearances. Nora found herself captivated by Kale's presence. There was warmth beneath his alien exterior that drew her in like gravity pulling at stars in orbit around each other. She continued asking questions, some silly, others profound. And each answer drew them closer together in ways neither could fully comprehend yet. "Do you have friends?" she asked one day while resting her chin on her hand playfully. Cale hesitated again. Memories flooded back, faces long gone, but he finally replied quietly, "I did. A long time ago." "What happened to them?" Nora asked with genuine concern etched across her brow. "They left," he said softly. "I outlived them all." His words struck deep within Nora's heart. She couldn't fathom what it meant to be so utterly alone in such vastness, a concept too heavy for someone so young yet filled with empathy beyond measure. Reaching across once more, she took Cale's hand firmly in hers and said earnestly, "You're not alone now. You have me." For the first time in centuries, a fleeting warmth stirred within him. A sensation long buried beneath layers of loss and duty began to awaken like dormant seeds sprouting after rain fell upon dry earth. As sunlight began its descent outside, the cafe bathed in golden hues. Nora's mother entered looking around anxiously until spotting her daughter nestled comfortably across from Cale. "There you are," she exclaimed, rushing over with relief flooding her voice. "I've been looking all over for you." Nora smiled sheepishly, but turned back toward Cale one last time before leaving. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Cale hesitated momentarily. Thoughts raced through his mind, weighing logic against emotions, before he found himself nodding slowly despite uncertainty gnawing at him from within. "I will," he managed finally. Nora beamed brightly before hopping off her seat and running off with her mother, while laughter echoed behind them. A sound Cale hadn't heard in ages, filling up spaces once occupied only by silence. As he sat there alone again, the now empty room echoing softly around him, he stared at the cold cup of coffee before him, wondering how something so simple could hold such meaning now that hope had begun flickering back into existence after centuries spent adrift among stars without purpose or direction any more than mere shadows cast upon walls long forgotten by time itself. A growing bond. The routine begins. The days following their first encounter unfolded like the pages of a well-loved book. For Nora, the cafe became a magical realm where she could escape the mundane realities of school and home life. Each afternoon after class, she rushed to the cafe, her heart racing with excitement. She never knew what new stories Cale would share or what questions she could ask him next. Cale, on the other hand, found himself in an unfamiliar rhythm. Each day, he returned to the same booth, his cup of coffee untouched, waiting for the bright spark of Nora's presence. He had spent centuries wandering through galaxies, but nothing prepared him for the warmth this young girl brought into his life. Her laughter echoed in his mind long after she left, a sound he had almost forgotten existed. Unraveling mysteries. As the weeks passed, Nora's curiosity about Cale deepened. She began to notice small details about him that intrigued her. His skin shimmered with patterns that seemed to shift and change under the cafe lights, and his eyes held a depth that suggested he had seen things far beyond her imagination. "Where did you learn to speak English so well?" she asked one day, her head tilted in curiosity. Cale smiled softly. "I have traveled many worlds and learned many languages," he replied, his voice steady yet distant, as if he were recalling memories from another lifetime. Nora's eyes widened. "Have you been to space? Like real outer space?" "Yes," Cale said, his gaze drifting as if he were looking at stars only he could see. "I have traveled among the stars." Nora leaned forward, captivated. "What's it like? Do you see aliens? Are there spaceships?" Cale chuckled softly at her enthusiasm. "Yes, there are many kinds of beings and ships that travel through space. Some are friendly. Others are not." Finding common ground. Their conversations often meandered through fantastical topics: planets made entirely of crystal, creatures that glowed in the dark, and civilizations that thrived on gas giants. Nora's imagination soared as Cale painted vivid pictures with his words. One day, as they shared a slice of chocolate cake, Nora's favorite, she asked him a question that had been lingering in her mind. "Do you ever miss your home?" The question hung in the air like a fragile bubble waiting to burst. Cale's expression shifted. A shadow crossed his face as he contemplated her words. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I miss it very much." Nora felt a pang of empathy for him. "What was it like? Your home?" "It was beautiful," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. There were mountains that touched the sky and oceans that sparkled like diamonds under the sun. Nora imagined it vividly, a world filled with vibrant colors and breathtaking landscapes. "You should show me one day," she exclaimed excitedly. Cale smiled at her enthusiasm, but felt a weight in his chest at the thought of sharing his world with her, a world now lost to him. The weight of loneliness. As their friendship blossomed, Cale began to open up more about his past. Stories filled with grandeur and sorrow intertwined like vines around an ancient tree. He spoke of battles fought for peace, of alliances forged among stars, and of friendships that had once meant everything to him. But there was always an underlying sadness in his tales, a reminder that those days were gone forever. "I had friends once," he told Nora one afternoon as they sat across from each other in their usual booth. "Brave souls who stood by my side." "What happened to them?" Nora asked gently. "They are gone," Cale replied, his voice heavy with grief. "Time has taken them away." Nora reached across the table again, taking his hand in hers. "You have me now," she said with unwavering sincerity. Cale looked down at their clasped hands, a small human hand enveloping his alien one, and felt something stir within him again, a flicker of hope igniting amidst the shadows of despair. Learning to laugh again. As their bond deepened, Nora introduced Cale to more aspects of Earth life, simple joys that had once seemed trivial to him, but now held new meaning in her presence. One day, while they shared a plate of fries, Nora decided it was time for some levity. "Okay, I'm going to tell you a joke," she declared dramatically. Cale raised an eyebrow, but nodded encouragingly. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" she asked with a grin. "To get to the other side," Cale guessed hesitantly. Nora erupted into giggles. "No, to get away from you." She pointed at him playfully before bursting into laughter again. Cale stared at her for a moment before an unfamiliar feeling washed over him, something light and airy that tickled at the edges of his being. He couldn't help but chuckle softly at her infectious joy. "See, you laughed," Nora exclaimed triumphantly. "I suppose I did," he admitted with a hint of surprise in his voice. From then on, laughter became a part of their daily routine. Nora telling jokes while Cale tried to understand human humor and failing miserably, but enjoying every moment nonetheless. It was as if each laugh peeled back layers of sadness that had enveloped him for so long. The power of friendship. With each passing day spent together in their little cafe haven, Nora became more than just a friend. She became Cale's lifeline, a bridge connecting him back to emotions he thought lost forever. He found himself sharing stories not just about his empire, but also about dreams he had long buried beneath responsibilities and burdens too heavy for one being to carry alone. "Do you think I could travel among the stars one day?" Nora asked one afternoon as they watched sunlight dance through leaves outside the window. "Of course," Cale replied confidently. "You have the spirit of an explorer." Nora beamed at his words. They filled her with determination and wonder about what lay beyond Earth's atmosphere, a universe waiting for her discovery. But even as hope flourished between them like wildflowers breaking through concrete cracks, the shadows loomed closer each day, threatening to disrupt their fragile bond without warning or mercy. A new challenge approaches. One fateful afternoon while they sat together laughing over shared stories, the door swung open with a force that sent chills down Cale's spine. A group of men entered, not just any men but figures cloaked in dark attire exuding an aura of authority and menace that made even seasoned warriors tremble before them. Cale's heart raced, memories flooded back, memories filled with betrayal and loss, the kind that haunted him relentlessly across galaxies far away from here. Nora noticed immediately. She turned toward him concerned, but before she could ask what was wrong, The men approached their table with purpose etched into every step they took. The warmth of their friendship would soon be tested against forces far greater than either could imagine. An adventure awaited them both beyond anything they had ever known. Secrets unveiled. The arrival of shadows. The cafe had become a safe haven for Nora and Cale, a place where laughter and stories intertwined like the threads of a tapestry. Their bond deepened with each passing day, and Nora's innocent curiosity continued to draw Cale out of his shell. However, the tranquility they had found was about to be disrupted. One afternoon, as they sat in their usual booth, the door swung open with a force that sent a chill through Cale's spine. The group of men who entered wore dark cloaks that billowed around them like storm clouds. Their presence was commanding, and an unsettling aura surrounded them. Cale's heart raced. He recognized them immediately, agents from his past, sent to retrieve him. Nora, oblivious to the tension in the air, waved at Cale with her usual enthusiasm. "Cale, I brought you a cookie," she exclaimed, holding up a chocolate chip cookie as if it were a trophy. Cale forced a smile, but his mind raced. He had spent centuries evading these agents, who represented the remnants of his fallen empire, those who sought to reclaim him for their own purposes. They had been searching for him since he fled his world, and now they had finally found him. A moment of decision. As the men approached their table, Cale felt an overwhelming urge to protect Nora. She was just a child, innocent and full of life. She didn't deserve to be dragged into his complicated past. He needed to act quickly. "Stay close to me," he whispered urgently as the men drew near. Nora looked up at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What's wrong?" Before he could respond, one of the men stepped forward, a tall figure with sharp features and cold eyes that seemed to pierce through Cale's very essence. "Cale," he said smoothly, "it's time to come home." Cale's heart sank. "I have no home," he replied defiantly. The man smirked, unfazed by Cale's resistance. "You are mistaken. Your empire needs you. We need you." Nora's eyes darted between Cale and the men, sensing the tension but not understanding its full weight. "Who are they?" she asked innocently. "They're just some people I used to know," Cale said quickly, trying to downplay the situation. The weight of truth. The man continued to press forward. "You cannot hide forever, Cale. Your people are in danger. You have responsibilities." Cale felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. He had spent so long running from those responsibilities. He had lost everything once before. He wasn't ready to lose again. But as he glanced at Nora, her wide eyes filled with concern for him. Something shifted within him. "I will not go back," he declared firmly. Nora squeezed his hand tightly under the table, her small fingers trembling slightly. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," she said softly, but resolutely. The man's expression hardened as he glanced at Nora. "This child is irrelevant," he sneered. "She cannot protect you." Cale felt a protective instinct surge within him like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. "She is more important than you can ever understand," he retorted fiercely. A choice made. With that declaration hanging in the air, something unexpected happened. The other patrons in the cafe began to take notice of the confrontation unfolding before them. Whispers spread like wildfire through the room as people turned their attention toward the scene at their booth. Nora stood up abruptly, her voice ringing out clear and strong above the murmurs. "Leave him alone. He's my friend." The boldness of her words shocked everyone into silence for a brief moment. Even Cale was taken aback by her fierce loyalty. "Cale is not just anyone," she continued defiantly, her small stature somehow radiating immense strength. "He's special." The man scoffed but hesitated momentarily, as if taken aback by Nora's bravery. Seeing this momentary weakness gave Cale hope, a flicker of light in an otherwise dark situation. He realized then that he couldn't let fear dictate his actions any longer. He had someone worth fighting for now. "I choose my own path," Cale said firmly, standing tall beside Nora, as if drawing strength from her unwavering spirit. The retreat. The agent's face twisted into a scowl as he realized that this confrontation was not going in his favor. The tension crackled in the air like static electricity before a storm, a battle of wills between two worlds colliding in that small cafe. Very well, he spat out bitterly after what felt like an eternity of silence. But know this, we will not stop searching for you. With that ominous warning hanging over them like a dark cloud, the agents turned and strode out of the cafe, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with uncertainty and fear. As soon as they were gone, Nora turned to Cale with wide eyes, filled with concern and curiosity all at once. "What was that about?" she asked softly. Cale took a deep breath. His heart still raced from adrenaline and fear for both their futures. "It's complicated," he replied slowly, choosing his words carefully. Nora tilted her head thoughtfully. "You can tell me anything," she encouraged gently. The revelation. Cale hesitated for a moment before deciding that perhaps it was time to share more about himself, the truth behind his loneliness, and why those men had come for him. "I am not just anyone," he began slowly, searching for the right way to explain without overwhelming her young mind. Was an emperor." Nora's eyes widened further. She leaned closer as if trying to absorb every word he spoke. "My people were great explorers," he continued softly, recalling memories long buried beneath layers of pain and loss. "We traveled across galaxies, conquering worlds and learning from them." "Wow!" Nora exclaimed in awe, but then frowned slightly as she sensed sadness in his tone. "What happened?" Cale looked away for a moment. Memories flooded back, images of battles fought over power and betrayal that had led to his empire's downfall. The loss of friends who had stood by him through thick and thin now reduced to mere shadows lingering in his mind. "We lost everything," he said quietly, finally meeting her gaze again, his luminous eyes reflecting sorrow mixed with determination. "Now I am alone, except for you." A new understanding. Nora felt a pang in her heart at his admission. She reached out again, taking his hand firmly within hers, her small fingers wrapping around his alien skin as if promising him that he would never be alone again. "You're not alone anymore," she declared fiercely once more, her voice filled with conviction beyond her years. Cale smiled softly at her words, a warmth blossoming within him that chased away some of the shadows threatening to consume him whole once again. In that moment, a bond forged through shared experiences began transforming into something deeper, a connection that transcended worlds and species alike, a friendship built on trust, understanding, and above all, hope, a path forward. As they sat there together, the cafe slowly returning back to its normal rhythm, the world outside continued spinning, unaware of the monumental shift taking place inside its walls between two unlikely friends destined for greatness together, or perhaps even greater challenges ahead. But whatever lay ahead, Cale knew one thing for sure. With Nora by his side, he would face it all head-on, ready to reclaim not just his past, but forge a new future filled with laughter, joy, and perhaps even love.